had a plan of what type of beat I wanted to make before loading FL Studio. Usually people go in without any ideas and make what comes to their mind. My mind doesn't work that way, so I sort of needed some structure before I started. With every beat, I start off with a simple chord progression and then make a top line melody to start off with only using one sound. I'm using a sound bank that is free from Games GMS sound bank that I'll link in the description below. It is free to use, so shout out Games for the free kit. We all appreciate free kits. I usually start with plucks, synths, or keys for the first main melody, but before I laid anything down, I had to choose a scale, and the scale I'm using right now is A sharp minor. I'm using the EP key from the sound kit, and I start off with some bass notes first and repeat them for every step. Here's a little quick lesson on music theory for all you guys who don't know anything about music theory, just like me. If you think of the notes in the scale as numbers, A sharp would be 1, C would be 2, C sharp would be 3, D sharp would be 4, F would be 5, F sharp would be 6, and then G sharp would be 7, and then A sharp, an octave above, would be 8, but you can just call it 1. Like 8 and 1 are the same thing. So the bass pattern I made was a 6, 7, 1, 3 chord progression. I mean, these are not chords, these are just root notes of chords that you can make, but I wanted to keep the melody almost open because I was going to add more melody layers after this first initial MIDI. Then on top of those bass root notes, I did a simple little repeating melody with the 2 and the 3, which is C and C sharp and the A sharp minor natural scale. Usually when you want to create leads or top lines, using the 2, 3, 7, and 4 will always sound good. So together with the bass notes in the top line, which is all pretty simple, it sounds like this. Then from that first initial MIDI, I copied and pasted it to a new sound, and the sound is called Squared Squares Synth in the same GMS hit by Games, or Gems, and I added another top line on top of what we already created with the first initial MIDI. So it sounds like this by itself. I'm a person who is very formulaic, so when creating counter melodies, I like to use the 2, 3, 4, 7 mostly, like I said before. Let me know how you guys create leads and chords and just tips on how to create better melodies in the comments below. If you guys are either new to producing or pretty experienced, let me know in the comments. Lastly, for the last melody loop I specifically made, we still have a vocal chop left, but this is the last melody I laid down by myself. It's another sound from the GMS kit, and it is just a square lead, and it's pretty simple. It's a very simple pattern. Oh my gosh, I did not mean to do that, but it's a very simple pattern. I went from the 3 down to the 2, and then I went from the 4 to the 5, and then I went from the 3 to the 2 to the 7 to the 4. So I just realized that I'm using the 2, 3, 4, 7 method again while I'm recording this video. So I think that's pretty funny. I guess I am pretty formulaic. And the 2, 3, 4, 7 is useful in all scales, not just the natural minor and majors. I mean, you can use other scales, but I highly suggest that you just stick to the natural minor and major scales and figure out how to make melodies in those scales first before exploring other ones. Anyways, the pattern is extremely simple and repetitive, but that is what I wanted to tie every layer together with a simple melody, and with the next thing I'm gonna talk about, which is the vocal chop. So the vocal chop that I'm about to show you guys is a little intricate, so I guess if I were to make this melody right here intricate, it would just be too chaotic for the overall loop. So I got the vocal chop from Cymatics. It's a website where they have royalty-free vocal samples that you can use in your own beats. I mean, there are a bunch of different types of vocal loops, going from R&B, just like straight up rap beats, and then there are also like these like EDM-ish sort of vocal chops that I found that I really like. There are other websites like that too, some good mentions are lander, splice, output, and yeah, if you want to use like vocal loops and don't really want to make your own and just download them without having to worry about copyright laws and stuff like that, those are good websites to check out. I would still get in the habit of making your own loops though. I know those websites have like pre-made loops and stuff like that, which is, it's not a bad thing to use loops. I would say if you're first starting out, using loops is not a bad idea, so you get a feel of like how loops should sound, and using loops is a good way to work on your drums when you're first starting out too. But it is a good habit to start making loops from scratch on your own, because in the long run, if you want to continue like your music producing career or whatever, I'm talking like I'm a big music person, it's worth it in the long run. So onto the actual vocal chop, it sounds like this by itself. I did have to pitch it up, but I got it from a different computer and I sent it to my same email, so it's already pitched up, but initially it wasn't in the pitch or in the key of A sharp minor. But this is what it sounds like by itself. So with the melody being done, let's move on to the drums. I gotta say my drums are pretty simple when I'm making beats, because I want either artists or singers to make a song to whatever beat I'm making. So I always like to keep the drums simple so an artist can catch a flow on it and make a song, because that's what you want to happen if you're making beats. You want to create songs with artists, unless you're just making instrumentals for fun that stand alone by themselves. But for this sake, or for my sake, I like making songs, I guess. So I started off with a pretty common clap pattern. You just put a clap on every half step and it sounds like this. For the drum kit sounds I'm using right now from a free drum kit from homeboy Jacob, and the name of the sounds I'm using for this beat is at the top of the piano roll. So if you want to know, this clap is the pre-shift clap. So the next thing I added was a hi-hat. It's a hyperpop hi-hat, and it is just a 2-step pattern. And right before the 4th step, I did a little 1/4 step triplet roll, and it sounds pretty nice as a transition. But like I said, I like to keep the drums simple just for the fact that artists catch a flow pretty easily without having the drums be too complicated. But also, I'm not the best at drums, but that's a different story. Then for every 8 bars, we have a stomp, a hyperpop stomp. I know a lot of producers use stomps in like Jersey Club beats, but I guess drill, Jersey Club, and hyperpop have the same sort of rhythm with drum patterns, I would say. So I like the way this sounds, and it sounds like this. It transitions every 8 bars pretty nicely because it's pretty aggressive when you hear it at first, and it ties well with the kicks that I'm about to show you in the 808s. Then we have an open hi-hat. I just place some wherever I think sounds cool. I'm gonna say that same explanation for the snares and the rims, but when you add percussions, it's all about rhythm. If it sounds good to you, then put it wherever you think it fits. That's what I would say when adding perks, and it sounds like this. Then here's the snare. I mean, to be honest, you don't need to add this many perks. Even though these patterns are pretty simple, all you really need to make beats is a hi-hat, clap, 808, and if you want a kick and your melody. If you have all those things, I mean, and they sound good, that's all you need, you know. Here's the snare pattern I put down. I like the way the snare sounds. And then it just repeats for the other 4 bars. One more thing, when you're adding perks other than the basic hi-hats, claps, 808s, and kicks, I would say a thing to remember that helps me with like adding random perks that I think sound cool is you want them to play off of each other to create bounce. So I would say the rim shot, the snare, and the open hat all mesh well together, and I'll show you guys what that sounds like with the full beat. But this is what the rim shot sounds like. Now to the 808s, and for 808 patterns, you should use the root notes and the chord progression that we made and the melody loop as a reference of what notes the 808 should be in your drum pattern. For example, I started on the 6, went to the 7, and then dropped down to the 1 and the 3. And you got to make sure that your 808s are in key, because I know back in the day when I first started producing, my 808s were out of key, and you'll get called out on it. And no one likes out of key 808s because they sound really bad. Make sure just follow the root notes in your chord progression, you'll be fine. Also, I put the velocity for the 808s to max, which is this little bar at the bottom that says velocity. Basically, in simple terms, it just makes the 808s hit harder, but it's not crazy loud. So after the 808s, I just copied the 808 pattern, pasted into a kick that I like. Still, all the drums I'm using is from the Homeboy Jacob kit, and it's free. I'll also link it in the description. I just copied and pasted the 808 pattern to the kick pattern. I know a lot of people, I know when I first started, people told me to put the kicks all together on C, so it would look like this instead of the notes replicating the 808 pattern. People would tell me put the kick always on C and just have every kick hit like that, and then the next 4 bars over here would be the same as the first 4. Recently I heard that people have stopped doing that, so I was just like, I guess whatever sounds good, you can do either method. I don't think people will care as long as your kicks and 808s are in key. No one will really know the difference. And I also pushed the velocity up to max, so the kicks also hit hard too. So after you do the drums, you can arrange the beat the way you like it. I arrange my beats with an intro with just a couple of the melody layers playing at the beginning. I only had the first initial MIDI playing with the vocal chop. I had the vocal chop playing all the way through except for these steps, but the first 8 bars I had just 2 of the melodies playing, 2 parts of the melodies playing, and then I added some drums in for the next step, for the next 8 steps, which is usually where a hook would go, and then the next 16 steps is where the chorus would go, and then you have another hook here from 33 to 41, and then you have 16 more bars for the chorus to repeat. And yeah, I guess that's how you make a song. That's why you should structure your beats similar to what I just showed, or just, I mean, you can arrange your beats anyway, as long as artists can just hop on them and just record and know where certain sections would go. I guess that would be the job of the producer. Also, when you're arranging, it's good to add and get rid of drum sounds throughout so the beat is not completely boring. Same with the melodies. You can take out one part of the melody and then bring it back in later, and it just adds variety so the listener is not bored. You can also add an outro, so right where the second chorus would end, you can add like 8 to 16 bars of just your beat playing with certain parts of your melody playing and certain drums playing too. Usually with outros, I see people just having their melody play at the very end with like an 808 or a clap, but you can do whatever you want. That's the beauty about music. For mixing too, my mixing is super simple because I don't know anything about audio engineering, but I add just reverb. I EQ the low ends of the melody loops, so and I put every layer into a different track or mixer track, so I can EQ it separately, and if I want to add different effects to an individual sound, I can do that as well without routing every melody loop to one track. I mean, you can do that, but I think it's more organized when you separate every sound. And yeah, with the melodies, I just take out the low end, so this little knob right here, you can just throw that all the way down, and you want to take out the low ends so the 808s hit harder and so the beat's not muddy, because if you don't take out those low ends, your 808 will clash with your melody and no one is going to want to use it or listen to it. Some other effects you can add are gross beat, and I've been using Fruity Delay 3 Ping Pong. It is good to add a little atmosphere vibe to it. I think I added it onto the first MIDI we made, and I also added gross beat to the first sound we made with our melody. Yeah, I just added fruity delay and I EQ'd the low ends. And it just adds more movement to the melody, so you just bob your head more. For those of you who don't know what gross beat is, it's basically an effect you can add to a sound, and it just makes a loop sound cool or interesting. Like, I know one of the effects in gross beat is like it can make a sound like come in and out through a gate, and it sounds pretty bouncy. But you can mess around with the different presets on gross beat and other effect plugins that you come across. For how loud I make every sound, it depends on what we're talking about. I can go through the mixer track to explain some of them. I'll give a brief description of what decibel I make every sound, so nothing's too loud or nothing's too quiet. So for 808s, I usually keep them around 9 through 6 dBs. For the clap, I keep it around 15, and if you want a loud clap, you can go 12. And then hi-hats, I keep them around 21 to 18 decibels. For the kick, I keep it around 6. And then for perks and such like that, for open hi-hats, I would say keep them pretty low because they can get loud through speakers. So I would say a little less than what your hi-hats are. So maybe around like 24 to 27 decibels for open hi-hats. Then for snares, you want to keep them at the same volume as a clap, so around 15, 12-ish. Even with rim shots too, you can keep it around 15 to 12 decibels. For the loops, I would say keep your main melody at around 15 to 12 decibels. For counter melodies, I would say drop them a little lower. And for like vocal chops, you wanna drop that lower than everything else, because it may not sound loud when you're playing it through your headphones, but when you play it through speakers, the vocal chop comes through pretty loud. So I'm still pretty new at mixing. What I'm saying right now may not be right, but from what I learned, I think I guesstimated the right decibels for the different instruments pretty well. Let me know in the comments if my mixing is pretty decent. I think it sounds okay. It's very simple. I'm not an audio engineer, so I'm just a bedroom beat maker, you know. Thank you for watching the entire video. I appreciate that a lot. I hope you learned something new about how to make beats in general, and specifically for the genre of diary and digicore. Please leave a like and comment anything you have learned from this video that you found interesting. I would like to hear what you guys have to say. And with that being said, here's the full beat, and have a nice day. Peace.